So let's try to keep this in perspective here as far as a timeline goes. Okay. The war was declared on like April 22nd. May 1st is when the Battle of Manila Bay occurs. Mid to late May, blockading starts in the Caribbean around Puerto Rico and Cuba. Um, Late June, early June, the Navy and the Marines arrive in Cuba. Late June, the Army arrives in Cuba. Fighting in Cuba takes place late June, early July. Fighting in Puerto Rico, mid-July to mid-August. Fake Battle of Manila and transfer of power in Puerto Rico occur on August the 13th. So realistically, you're looking at a period from May 1st to the middle of August. That's roughly around 3.5 months of actual real fighting. Maybe 15 weeks. The war is not officially over until December 10th of 1898, with the Treaty of Paris version whatever. They should start labeling these things like Super Bowls with Roman numerals. There's so many flipping treaties of Paris. It's like, we just got done with a war. What are we going to do? Let's go to Paris and sign a treaty. Okay, I'm okay with that. Yeah. It just, France had nothing to do with it, but what the heck? Let's go sign a treaty there. So, three basic things out of the Treaty of Paris. Number one, Spain agrees to get out of the Western Hemisphere. America takes possession of Puerto Rico, which we still have today. Puerto Rico is an independent commonwealth of the United States. Cuba becomes a protectorate. Now, this is a little bit sketchier. A protectorate is an area that you don't control, but you basically take care of. So, we agree to take care of Cuba until such time that they're going to be independent. The independence of Cuba is established by a congressional resolution called the Platt Amendment. I think that's like 1905 or something, but not a big deal. America gets the Philippines. Now, this one is kind of, in some ways, it kind of comes out of nowhere. Because remember, when we had talked about this before, America's real interest in the Philippines was we wanted Manila in a very similar relationship to what the British had in Hong Kong. Hong Kong was still Chinese, but they used British money. They followed British law. They spoke English. They were essentially British. That's what we're looking at for Manila. We want Manila and we want some small islands because there's 3,000 of them in the Philippine archipelago. Our original intent was that we would do this. We would get Manila and some small islands, and the Filipinos and the Spanish would figure out what was going on with the Philippines from there. We had no real intent of, going farther than that. The problem comes up when America discovers that Spain is not intending on keeping the Philippines. What they are planning on doing is they're going to sell the Philippines to Germany. When we kind of figure that out, we instead step in, offer them $20 million in cash for the whole of the Philippines, and they sell it to us. So we take over the Philippines with the kind of sort of intention that somewhere down the road, at an unspecified future date and time, when, we feel they're ready, we'll let the Filipinos have their independence. Again, the Filipinos are not consulted for any of this, leading to a very, very bad thing that we're going to talk about in unit or part 3. Last but not least, Spain is allowed to keep Morocco in North Africa. The United States had no real desire to take possession of anything in Africa. And apparently the Spanish had no desire for it either, because a couple of years later they end up selling it to the French. And that causes a kerfuffle that almost leads to a war with Germany, too. Wow, those wacky Germans and their need to start wars. In hindsight, it may have been better had we actually taken Morocco, but I digress. The treaty is approved overwhelmingly by the Senate, 57 to 27. Now, that having been said, despite the fact that that this is like literally a 2-to-1 majority on the approval, not everybody's happy with it. Many Democrats and many Republicans actually are very upset with this. Now, this is interesting. The conservative Republicans are upset with it for a different reason than the liberal Democrats. The liberal progressive Democrats are upset because they wanted the war. Remember, they were one of the groups that really pushed America into war. But what they were hoping to achieve was Cuban independence, not that America takes over a bunch of places. This doesn't sit well because that's not what they were about. That's not what they wanted. That's not what they felt that the war was going to be about. On a similar level, um, the Republicans are not happy because they supported the war in defense of America, but there seems to be something contradictory about the idea of a democratic republic being an empire, which is now what America is by definition. We have countries under our control. We are now an empire. There is the belief by both progressives and conservatives that America should somehow be different than other nations. We should be involved and we should be, liberating people on the progressive side, but we shouldn't be keeping places. That's not what we do. On the conservative side, we shouldn't be involved with anybody unless it's an issue of self-defense, and we certainly shouldn't be keeping anybody. Now, why do people support it? I mean, and there's some very famous Americans who are against this, including, Andrew Carnegie, Mark Twain, former President Grover Cleveland, Samuel Gompers. They're all opposed to this. But why support it? Well, number one, it goes back to that theory of frontierism. This is the expansion of the United States that Frederick Jackson Turner had basically intimated had to happen. If we wanted to keep growing, we had to become an imperial power. So, what's the purpose or what comes out of this? Well, number one, it provides us with resources we need. In the Philippines alone, you have bananas, pineapples, coconuts, sugar, rubber. These are things that America wants and needs. Market availability. The Philippines had a middle class that was looking to spend money on stuff, and America had the stuff that they should be buying. And what better way to get a market than to control the market? It also gave us supply depots. When there were American ships in the Pacific that needed something, a repair, fuel, food, supplies, no longer did we have to go to a British country or a French country or a German country to get what we wanted. We now had someplace that we could stop and you could get what you needed. And last but not least, there is the very real issue of militarism. Um, those bases in the Pacific and the Caribbean provide protection for American business interests in those areas. They also are an added level of security for the United States itself in a very increasingly small world where the two oceans no longer protect us from the possibility of being involved in a conflict with somebody. So, this is the end of part two, and we'll pick it up in part three later. Peace and love.